A historic showdown over a Supreme Court vacancy.
If I win this election, I should be the one who nominates Justice Ginsburg's successor.
There will be a vote. We're going to move forward without delay.
And we must use every tool to ensure that this vacancy is reserved for the next president.
Some have mentioned the possibility the House could move to impeach as a way of stalling.
We have our options. We have arrows in our quiver.
Or were they just...
which is pretty much, we ran a lot of repeats over the weekend. So this will be a live show. And we'll try to make some news, come up with something as it has to do with the election in a few, the debate in a few days, and the election in November.
Indeed. There was big news in my house. On Friday night, Brian, I heard somebody running around on the deck, and then I looked out and I realized it was bear. There was a great big bear.
Really?
Yeah, tore open all the garbage up and down our street.
Do you go, when you see the bear, do you go out there?
Absolutely not. I stay in the house and watch it. And then I get up real early the next morning, and I pick up the trash from...
You should go to Antifa and borrow some bear spray. They seem to like that.
Man, oh man.
The other big news, obviously, this weekend, Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away on Friday, and we're going to have the president on our show at 8 a.m. to react to that, and we'll ask him about other news of the day as well.
Plenty to talk about.
That's right. The Supreme Court was draped in black to honor the life of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg as the nation mourns her passing.
Yep, Capitol Hill, the debate intensifying over whether President Trump should fill the longtime justice's seat ahead of the November election.
Griff Jenkins joins us live outside the Supreme Court. And Griff, whether or not to fill it before the election really depends on which side of the aisle you sit on.
Boy, it sure does. Steve Ainsley and Brian, good morning. And you know, she was one of the country's greatest champions for women's rights with that remarkable legal career that made her the cultural and feminist icon that she became. And if you need in the Senate, now Joe Biden has already weighed in. He is imploring Senate Republicans to not vote to move forward. Here's some of what he had to say.
People of this nation are choosing their future right now as they vote. To jam this nomination through the Senate is just an exercise in raw political power. And I don't believe the people of this nation will stand for it.
And Speaker Pelosi vowing to fight tooth and nail, even threatening impeachment to stop the process. But the biggest problem for the president may lie in his own party as Majority Leader McConnell readies the stage for a fast-track process. Alaska's Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski becoming the second GOP vote after Susan Collins to say she will not support moving forward on a nominee. In a statement, she says, "I did not support taking up a nomination 8 months before the 2016 election to fill the vacancy created by the passing of Justice Scalia. We are now even closer to the 2020 election, less than 2 months out, and I believe the same standard must apply." But the president picks up a GOP supporter who had been thought to be in question. That's retiring Tennessee Senator Lamar Alexander, who says, quote, "No one should be surprised that a Republican Senate majority would vote on a Republican president's Supreme Court nomination, even during a presidential election year." Senate Majority Leader McConnell is only doing what Democrat leaders have said they would do if the shoe were on the other foot. Guys, now it's going to be all eyes today on Senators Mitt Romney, Cory Gardner, and even former Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley, all of whom none of them have indicated exactly how they would go. And I can tell you, it's going to be a real interesting play. And when the president talks to you guys in just 2 hours, we'll probably hear a little bit of, I was down in Fayetteville, North Carolina over the weekend listening to tens of thousands at that rally chanting, "Fill the seat." So this is about to be a supercharged week. Steve, Ainsley, Brian?
No kidding.
Thanks so much, Griff. Yeah, so if the Republicans, if two more Republicans side with Murkowski and Collins, then that will stop the process. Doubt that will happen, but we'll have to see. It's being reported that on her deathbed, that her granddaughter, she told her granddaughter that it was her dying wish to have the next president choose her successor. But if you look back at what she told the New York Times in 2016, she said that that's their job. There's nothing in the Constitution that says the president stops being the president in his last year. And Tim Murtaugh, who is Trump's communications director, he said Biden might not like it, but he said the president is elected for 4 years, not 3 years and 9 months, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, in her passing, I understand that. That's a lot of people theorize, you know, if it was Hillary Clinton as president with all the physical challenges that she had with cancer, she probably would have stepped aside. She obviously wants her a a liberal justice to fill her seat. But she also told the Washington Post when Justice Scalia died, 8 is not a good number. I think we hope that there'll be 9 as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, Senator Tom Cotton was quick, by the way, who's on the list, but the president said if I name somebody, it's going to be a woman. And let's be honest, he's going to name somebody as early as this week. Senator Tom Cotton said this about going forward.
There will be a vote. There have been some cases, like Justice Ginsburg herself, in which the nomination and confirmation process took less than 44 days. There have been other cases in which it took longer, so it's too soon to say right now, but we will move forward without delay. So we're not going to rush. We're not going to cut corners or skip steps. We're going to move forward without delay.
2 names we keep hearing, Judge Amy Coney Barrett, who already got her FBI check and background check to get on the 7th Court of Appeals, and Barbara Lagoa of the 11th Circuit in Atlanta. Collins and Murkowski, as Ainsley said, I'm not going to be voting for this. I want to wait. The other option, Steve, would be you name the justice and then say, I will do something after the election, whether it's in a lame duck session if President Trump loses and he has the majority in the Senate, or he just wins the election and he does it on his time.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see exactly what the timetable is. They'll have, we heard from Lindsey Graham yesterday. He said there will be a vote this year. Doesn't mean he didn't say before the election. It could be during the lame duck session. And keep in mind, the problem with that is going forward. What we heard from Chuck Schumer yesterday, he said, look, if the Republicans do this and jam this down our throat, nothing will be off the table. So in other words, they're talking about ending the filibuster going forward. They're talking about packing the court. They're talking about, some are suggesting there could be an impeachment, which we heard from Judge Napolitano in the previous hour, said that would be crazy. But we've already heard the Democrats this year talk about ending the filibuster and about packing the court. So if the Republicans say, you know what, you're absolutely right, we're not going to do anything until after the election, do you think then, if the Democrats win next time, the Democrats are going to say, you know what, the Republicans were so polite, we're not going to end the filibuster, and we're not going to pack the court.
They were so polite.
You really can't trust them.
Yeah.
Listen, anyway.
I like the Republicans. They're nice.
Listen, 2 Democrats were in Brooklyn at an open mic. AOC and Chuck Schumer himself talking about this is a time in American history when the Republicans cannot do what the Republicans legally can do. Watch this.
We need to make sure that we mobilize on an unprecedented scale to ensure that this vacancy is reserved for the next president. We must also commit to using every procedural tool available to us to ensure that we buy ourselves the time necessary. And to Mitch McConnell, we need to tell him that he is playing with fire. We need to make sure that this vacancy is protected.
But once we win the majority, God willing, everything is on the table. So if we don't win the majority, these questions are all moot. But if we win the majority, everything is on the table.
And that's where he's talking about filibuster and packing the court and impeachment and things like that. Actually, packing the Senate. They're talking about adding the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico and maybe Samoa as well. Look, we're 43 days away from the election, and the election is already being litigated. And if ultimately we have to turn to the Supreme Court, and Brian, to your point, where it's just 8 people on the Supreme Court, that could be a tie. There are a lot of Republicans who say that this is a very, essentially a tipping point in America where if we don't have an odd number that could break a tie, it could really be a mess on November 4th.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how people, if this is going to influence their vote. This is very important to conservatives. Many people went to the polls and voted for President Trump because, especially people who are, churchgoers, and the abortion laws really are important to them. So this is going to be a big deal.
On both sides.
Absolutely, absolutely. John Barrasso, he is the Senate GOP conference chairman, and he analyzed what that says about the new Democratic Party, seeing AOC together with Chuck Schumer at Ruth Bader Ginsburg's school in Brooklyn. Listen to this.
The thing that really is telling to me is, and you showed the video today of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez at a press conference with Chuck Schumer. I will tell you, anybody that's followed Chuck Schumer for a long time knows he doesn't like to share the camera or the microphone with anyone. She is the de facto Speaker of the House because Nancy Pelosi is terrified of her, and Chuck Schumer is worried about a primary from her in 2 years in New York. She is running the Democrat Party and wants to run it further and further to the left, and that's a big problem for the country.
Nancy Pelosi was being interviewed yesterday, and she said, we have arrows in our quiver, and I'm not about to discuss this right now, but we do have our options, Brian.
Yeah, I think Joe Biden's going to say, I'm going to make this about Obamacare, because taking people's health care away in the middle of the pandemic, not good. This comes up for a look into courts, I think, in November 10th, and that'll be after the election, and that's what they talk about that. They're going to talk about women's rights. They're going to try to make this about civil rights, voting rights, climate change, and it all changes, they claim, if this court gets a conservative where a liberal once was. So there's a lot going on. The other thing to keep in mind, I think first and paramount is the presidency. Second is the Senate. Cory Gardner, they say, if they jam a nominee through, gets hurt in Colorado. The theory is Cornyn gets hurt in Texas, perhaps. But it looks better for McConnell and Lindsey Graham in their respective races, which are very tight.
So you know what, Brian? Maybe they go ahead and they have the hearings, and then they have the vote after.
Please follow your conscience. Don't vote to confirm anyone nominated under the circumstances President Trump and Senator McConnell have created. The last thing we need is to add a constitutional crisis that plunges us deeper into the abyss, deeper into the darkness.
There you got Joe Biden yesterday in Philly urging Republican senators to not consider any Supreme Court nominees put forth by President Trump before the election. But what could happen if that seat stays empty and there's a contested election and things go to the Supreme Court? Let's ask the Cato Institute's Ilya Shapiro, author of the new book, Supreme Disorder, Judicial Nominations and Politics of America's Highest Court. Ilya, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Okay, so right now we have 9 sitting members of the U.S. Supreme Court. If, because the election is already being litigated in some measure in different localities, if on Election Day or beyond there are questions that ultimately go to the Supreme Court, what happens if there's a tie?
Right, there are 8 sitting members now, and if there's a tie, and we could have challenges coming from several swing states, for example, the lower court ruling would stand. A 4-4 means the Supreme Court takes no position and the lower court ruling stands. So that would mean the Third Circuit would be affirmed if it's out of Pennsylvania, the Seventh Circuit out of Wisconsin, the Sixth Circuit out of Michigan. It's not a constitutional crisis necessarily. The system is working. It just means that some people would see that result as less legitimate, perhaps, because the Supreme Court hasn't had its final say. On the other hand, the loser is likely to see the result as illegitimate regardless, whether it's decided by the Supreme Court or others, or not necessarily the losing candidate, but certainly the supporters. So it would be definitely a hairy situation.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, so the political dynamic is, obviously the president's got a list, and he probably knows exactly 1 or 2 names that would be at the top of that list. But the calculation for Mitch McConnell is he would like to go ahead and roll this out, but when would you have the vote? Would it be because there are a number of Republican senators who, if they vote a certain way, that's going to, they could potentially lose their seat in the U.S. Senate?
Yeah, he's checking that list more than twice, seeing who's nice. Hopefully nobody naughty left there anymore. So historically, we have had very quick confirmations, but that's back in the old days. In modern times, Ruth Bader Ginsburg was confirmed in 42 days, obviously not during the press of an election. And currently, I think we are 42 days, 43 days away from the election. Already 2 senators have announced they're not going to vote to confirm. So, only Mitch McConnell can only afford to lose 1, and maybe it would even be better politically for the Republicans to nominate someone, but not, process, but not fully confirm, to hold that out for the voters. I'm not going to advise Mitch McConnell or Donald Trump on politically. So in theory, there are no rules. Where we're going, there are no roads. It could be done, but in modern times, it's very, very quick.
Yeah, and ultimately, because Chuck Schumer said yesterday, at Ruth Bader Ginsburg's school in Brooklyn that nothing's off the table if the Republicans try to do that. But they've been talking about ending the filibuster in the Senate for a while. They've been talking about packing the court for a while. Going forward, more Democrats should actually be asked. So if I elect you for another term, are you for ending the filibuster? Are you for packing the court?
It's a fair question, and look, there's multidimensional game theory going on here. What happens in the election? How would that be affected if there is a confirmation vote before the election, or what happens after the election if Democrats win the White House but not the Senate, or vice versa, or if they win both? Could there be some sort of deal not to confirm if the Democrats promise not to pack? Historically, promises to court pack or moves to court pack have inured against, in the long term, the political interests of whoever pursues it. So it's a dicey road, and as I said, it's kind of chicken or game theory or what have you. But it's definitely high politics. And again, it is all politics. This is not about constitutional standards or legal standards. And
exit question, because you did bring up the politics. We know that the president has been considering Amy Coney Barrett for a while. For a seat on the Supreme Court, but also this new name that we hadn't heard much until this weekend, Barbara Lagoa. She's 52. She's an appeals court judge in the 11th Circuit. She apparently is from Miami, the daughter of Cuban exiles. The key is she's from Florida, and the president needs Florida. It's a battleground state. Is that part of the political calculation?
It's certainly going to be, or is. Judicial nominees have been picked for political reasons before. In fact, the last time there was a successful appointment to the Supreme Court in election year was 1956, when Dwight Eisenhower recess appointed, it wasn't even a confirmation, the Senate didn't want to come back into session, Bill Brennan, who's one of the liberal lions, and Eisenhower, I think, knew that. I mean, he had a long track record on the New Jersey Supreme Court, but needed to shore up his support among northeastern Catholics in metropolitan areas. And he later regretted that jurisprudentially, but it accomplished for him what he wanted it politically. So that's definitely a consideration. And Amy Coney Barrett has a longer track record. The conservative legal elite is more comfortable with her because of that. Lagoa, I haven't gone back to read the intermediate Florida appellate court opinions. Well reputed, went through the vetting, of course, to be on the 11th Circuit, but has only been there less than a year, was on the Florida Supreme Court only a year before that. Very well reputed, but again, I think there's a lot of Justice Department, White House lawyers skimming all of her opinion, more than skimming, looking at details in what exactly she's ruled.
Well, the president's going to be with us in 90 minutes. We'll see if he's any closer. Ilya Shapiro's got a great new book. It's called Supreme Disorder, Judicial Nominations and the Politics of America's Highest Court. Ilya, thank you very much for joining us live.
My pleasure. Take care.
Some have mentioned the possibility, if they try to push through a nominee in a lame duck session, that you and the House could move to impeach President Trump or Attorney General Barr as a way of stalling and preventing the Senate from acting on this nomination.
Well, we have our options. We have arrows in our quiver that I'm not about to discuss right now. We have a responsibility to meet the needs of the American people. When we weigh the equities, protecting our democracy requires us to use every arrow in our quiver.
It requires us.
Let's bring in Newt Gingrich, Fox News contributor, former Speaker of the House, and author of Trump and the American Future. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good morning. What's your reaction to that? What are her arrows? What options do they have?
What quiver?
Look, I think the Democrats are running two big gambles in the way they're responding to what is a legitimate move. After all, in 2016, it was Justice Ginsburg who said it was totally appropriate for a president to nominate and a Senate to confirm a justice during an election year. So they can simply go, Republicans can go around and quote Justice Ginsburg's own statements from 4 years ago. But the Democrats have two challenges. One, which Nancy Pelosi just exemplified, is they're going to get more radical, more frantic. You're going to see more crowds showing up at senators' houses and trying to intimidate people. They're going to talk about packing the court in the future. There'll be sort of a frenzy because the truth is that they're powerless. If the president nominates the people that we're looking at, they are people of faith. And the Democrats have to be very careful when they have somebody like Kamala Harris, who is as anti-Catholic, as openly anti-Catholic as she is, to not get involved in an anti-religious thing. Second, I think the real question is, can Mitch McConnell find 50 votes? If he can, there is nothing the Democrats can do to stop justice from being approved.
But Newt, you have to look around the corner and see what's there. If the president does that and gets it through in 40 days, it'll look like a short-term win. But if the results are motivating Democrats to get to the polls, that flips the Senate and gives Joe Biden the White House, is it worth it?
Well, I mean, first of all, I'm not at all sure that it motivates Democrats in the end more than Republicans. Remember, the fight over Justice Kavanaugh, where the Democrats were so vicious and so dishonest and so personal in their attack on him and his family, that led to the defeat of 4 Democratic senators. So I wouldn't assume, for example, that Peters in Michigan is safe if he decides to vote against somebody who's a Notre Dame professor and has a solid background, if in fact Barrett is the one who's chosen. I don't automatically assume that this is a winning issue for them. And I think that right now they're in a frenzy and they're all excited. But whether or not a week from now or 2 weeks from now, right, that's the central issue. I think it'll make the debate between Trump and Biden very interesting, to have Biden explain why in 2016 he was for what he's now against, et cetera. And I think it'll be interesting to see if he can actually carry out and think through that entire line without losing his track.
You know, Newt, it would also be interesting just to see that, you know, say there is a Senate hearing before the election. It would just be interesting to measure the tone and tenor of the questions from the Democrats of, for instance, Amy Coney Barrett, or who we've been talking about now, who apparently has rocketed to the top of the president's list, this 53-year-old Barbara Lagoa, who's an appeals judge from Miami. She's the daughter of Cuban exiles. I would imagine the questioning of her will be much different than we saw last time around from the Democrats.
Well, I think this is why I think they have to walk a very careful line. They can't come across as the anti-Catholic, anti-Christian, anti-religious belief party. And there's a grave danger of that, because the natural instinct of the secular Democrats is to be very hostile to the Catholic Church and to evangelicals and to conservative Jews, because their views are so dramatically different. Right. And I think it's having that highlighted in the last weeks of the campaign. If you look at a place like Michigan or Minnesota, or, as you point out, Florida, that may not be the most clever thing Democrats can do.
Yeah.
All right, Newt.
Understatement.
Right. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Glad to be with you.